What's up? What's up? We are live, GC Live. Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, coming at you for the first time this year on a Monday after a Gamecock victory, which means, frankly, it's a little bit easier Monday for us on Gamecock Central. A little bit more positivity in the air, and really just, I would say, a more fun show to do, honestly, coming off a win for the Gamecocks, 41-7 victory over Vanderbilt. And obviously, we're going to continue to break down that win here on the show today. We'll give you our initial thoughts. And, of course, maybe if we have time, just depending on the flow of the game, flow of the show, we will maybe look ahead to the Auburn game a little bit. Obviously, we'll have all week long to get into that. But, of course, I'm Wes Mitchell. He is Chris Clark. This is GC Live, presented by AffordableMedicalUSA.com. You can check them out, 803-926-1493. And I got a feeling, Chris, is going to be a show where we just get rolling and talk a lot. So why don't you go ahead and tell everybody about the game day chair from AffordableMedicalUSA.com.
Yeah, so if you happen to be on YouTube, like we hope you are, although we appreciate you joining from anywhere, top left hand corner, you'll see the game day chair. It is a super comfortable, super relaxing chair, power pillow, lumbar support. So when you're checking out away games on your couch, even at home games, a lot of people not going to the games this year, make sure you got yourself a comfortable chair to go along with all the other comforts at home. The Maxi Comfort Cloud with Twilight technology is what you need to check out for. That is the technical name for the game day chair. So if you go to AffordableMedicalUSA.com, search for that, Maxi Comfort Cloud with Twilight. Twilight is the lay down flat position, but this chair can put you in a variety of positions. Super comfortable, awesome fabric. Thanks to those guys at Affordable Medical Equipment for their support of the show. Make sure you check out the game day chair. The link is in the description on YouTube and on GamecockCentral.com as well.
And what's up to all of our live viewers who are on here already right now? The comments are just a little bit, a little bit more positive today. Everybody seems to be in a pretty good mood, Chris, and rightfully so. I think we knew, for one, this was an opportunity for South Carolina to win a game, and sort of get some momentum and get that feeling going again. But frankly, it's been a long time since Carolina fans have been able to wake up on a Sunday and feel that feeling that their team won, the day before. So I think that's massive for morale. I think that's massive for morale in the building as well. And obviously just a big positive all the way around. I think much like Chris, we try to keep it in perspective when South Carolina loses a game and sort of look at the big picture. We'll do the same thing. We'll try to do the same thing with this Vanderbilt game. Is Vanderbilt very good? No. I would say they are going to struggle to win a game this year. I truly believe. And I think for those of you who are not joining all of our shows, I think Chris Lee from Vandy Sports, when he was on last week, sort of later in the week, and really started giving us some feedback on what things were like in Nashville, that's when I really, Chris, started to think. I was like, I felt like South Carolina would win the game. That's when I really started to think South Carolina may just blow Vanderbilt out. And I thought maybe the weather would sort of be a factor that would make the game a little bit closer than it would have been otherwise. Obviously, it wasn't, unless you want to give a little bit of credit to the weather early on as both teams were sort of filling each other out. But I think we'll try to have some nuance here. With it being said that, yes, Vanderbilt is not a great football team, I think you also, on the same part of that conversation, we have to give South Carolina credit for going out and doing what they were supposed to do against a lesser opponent, as opposed to letting them hang around, as opposed to getting in one of these close games where anything could happen. And really, I thought offensively, started out 3 and out, but from that point forward, even the next 2 drives, weren't beautiful drives, but I think each was like 40-something yards. One was a field goal, one was a missed field goal. Then you have a 96-yard drive. And then every single drive from that point forward was a touchdown or it was a score other than the end of half and other than once they had put in the backups. I think that's the case. So, Chris, I would say a game where South Carolina business-like just went about, did what they were supposed to do against a team that they frankly should beat.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was some what you had to avoid if you're South Carolina in this game. You didn't want to leave this game feeling like you didn't play well at all against what ended up being a vastly inferior opponent. You know, we knew that South Carolina, from a talent standpoint, was going to be better because, let's just be frank, I mean, that Vanderbilt's going to be in that position against almost everybody on the roster, if not everybody on the roster. And so then you look at the fact that they were shorthanded. You know, they were down 30 players or so. Now, not all those were guys who played, but they had some significant contributors out in the game, especially in the secondary. And so, you know, when you look at that, you knew that, and we talked about this on Friday, I think, and Thursday, last time you were on, Wes, that South Carolina couldn't afford to go into this game and just submit a stinker and let Vandy hang around or have some shocking upset happen. And really, I think the way that was going to happen is if you go down there, you turn the ball over a bunch. You know, we talked about week one, Texas A&M, which just upset Florida. You know, they won by 5. How did they do it? They were sluggish. They turned the ball over 3 times, especially in the second half. Just a lot of things that didn't go very well for them. And so South Carolina was able to play a clean game. You know, they turned the ball over late on the Zaquandre White fumble. I think the drive before that, they had a punt on a 3-and-out, and then they started the game with the 3-and-out. Other than that, you're right, Wes. They drove every single other time. They either got a field goal attempt or made field goal or a touchdown aside from that end of half situation. So, you know, that was what they had to do, was just go out and play a clean game. We mentioned it in our Path to Victory feature on GamecockCentral.com. I kept it pretty broad. Said, look, just play a clean game. Don't shoot yourself in the foot with penalties. Don't turn the football over. And they were able to do that. You know, great third down defense. Again, some plays that you didn't really like defensively, but they bared down when they needed to. And offensively, I think, again, we're talking about this after every single game. We're talking about it in the context of a win now, but the adjustments that were made really after that first drive from about second quarter on, offensively, they were really good and did a lot of what they wanted against Vanderbilt.
Yeah, and I think we're continuing, Chris, to see the offense, I would say, maybe find its identity a little bit. It was an efficient day overall. And again, I mean, I know everybody, I know watching the game, it felt like a really sluggish start, and people were saying this is about to be ugly. But I think when you gain the context of going back and watching the thing as a whole, and again, first drive is 3-and-out. But guess what? That sometimes that happens in football. And you could even argue, you know, South Carolina comes out throwing the football, trying to spread the field vertically a little bit, you know, trying to open things up, which they didn't hit any of those balls. But maybe sets the tone for you a little bit that the DBs are going to have to be aware of that for the rest of the game. So you have 3-and-out, but then even then you have a field goal, a missed field goal, and then the 96-yard drive. So not exactly LSU circa 2019 offensively, you know, coming out, but you could already sort of see what they were trying to do. And then, you know, Muschamp mentioned adjustments in the running game. I haven't completely gotten through my rewatch yet. I'm curious to see. Early on, they were doing a lot of movement up front as far as pulling multiple offensive linemen, trying to pull guys to the outside, some pin and pull, you know, like we saw a lot of last year. I'm curious to see what they did differently as the game goes on. It's really hard to tell live, and sometimes even going back and watching, it's such a sort of down in the minutia thing that it's sort of hard to always notice exactly what they did differently. But when Muschamp says we made these adjustments to the running game, not even at halftime, right? Yeah. When he says we made adjustments on the fly, and is crediting Bobo, the offensive staff, and even it sounded, Chris, like some stuff they didn't bring into the game. So, you know, most games, so you have your complete offensive package, right? Like your entire playbook. And you've worked on that stuff preseason. You've worked on that stuff at some point, maybe for a different game, but then you sort of whittle it down per game, offensively. So you whittle it down. This is what you come into the game with. You add your wrinkles, add your things in that you think are going to hit against this opponent, but you maybe don't work on some things that week if you don't think you're going to use them in the game. From what Muschamp said, essentially there were some things that they had practiced before but weren't necessarily in the game plan at all for this week that they inserted into the game plan in the running game. And I think that's a good sign, man, because how many times did we talk about a lack as the year went on last year? How many times did we talk about a lack of adjustments offensively and just not being able to find something that could work for you on offense in the second half of games last year?
I mean, it was I don't know if I could say it was the biggest storyline for last year, but it was one of them, right? I mean, there's no doubt about that. There are a ton of storylines last season, and that was one. And, we talked about it preseason, and just that Mike Bobo, he was expected to make a difference there. This is a guy that's been around a while. He's seen a lot. He's gone up against a lot of the people that he's going to go up against, and he's just been around for so long, that experience factor where, there have been times in the past where South Carolina has carried a good game plan into games, but then maybe teams adjust and they sort of drop off, right? And what we've seen from this team in the first 3 games, recognizing that they have only won one of those, but they have squeezed more out of this offense than I think most people or reasonable people would have anticipated, given the challenges that we knew they were going to be facing from a personnel standpoint. And they've been able to score points in the second half against Tennessee, against Florida, and then, of course, against Vanderbilt when you look at from the second quarter on. And they've also put together, since the second half of the Florida game, really, you could even date it back to the second half of Tennessee, they put together some consistency on offense. They're not lighting up the scoreboard, right? But they're able to go out and be a factor. They're able to be a threat to score some points, to be a threat to move the chains. And that's been one of the biggest differences in this team being able to stay on the field some. That helps your defense. Defense has got to play better, of course, at times, especially with the explosive plays, with some of the run plays, some of the consistency. But that's something that Mike Bobo's really brought to this team. And, it's hard to, going back to your point about the runs, it's hard for us to know exactly what they carried into the game from a playbook standpoint, what they got to, what they didn't get to. In the second half, I do know just from watching stuff, they did run some power. They ran some speed option. They ran, some zone stuff. They put in the pitch. Now, was that already there? I don't know. But, the pitch to Deshaun Fenwick, in the second quarter. So the Kevin Harris play, on the 88-yarder, that was, Wes, you broke that one down actually on the Twitter sphere earlier, and that was one that they blocked really, really well, obviously, and Kevin Harris had to make one guy miss, and he did it. So I thought they carried, they've had some versatility, and I think the fact that they were able to show that and that the players and staff had the confidence to go do that, yes, it was against Vandy, but that was certainly a positive, I think, and they didn't play down to the competition at all.
Yeah, especially, like I said, adjusting on the fly, as Muschamp said they did, very impressive. And I think Gamecock Russ here, who very loyal watcher here of our show, I think he says it well. Bobo gives the offense a chance, right? Like this isn't an offense that is going to go up and down the field on teams. Although they did at times against Vandy, but against most teams, they're not going to just go up and down the field. That is an expectation that will leave you disappointed, I think, if you're a Carolina fan. But do you have a chance going into the game? Do you feel like that from a game plan standpoint, the guy dialing this thing up is going to give you a shot? Yes. Now, there's probably at some point going to be a game this year where it just doesn't click, and everybody's saying, "What in the world was that?" Odds are there's going to be Georgia's defense.
Yeah,
what we've seen so far, outstanding. They're going to make some really good offenses potentially look bad. So can that happen? Yes. But I think just big picture going in week to week, it really gives you a chance. And I think that's something as a Carolina fan, if you're listening or watching, that should make you feel good Rodney, by the way, I don't know if Rodney, and maybe I've missed this, but is this C Hill or is this Chill? Because if Colin Hill's nickname is now Chill, that is perfect. That is the perfect nickname for Colin Hill, because this guy, with everything going crazy around him, is chill. He's cool. He's calm. He's collected. And I think, Chris, in a game with where the weather was, I would say the weather was a factor, but then it wasn't a factor in a weird way. Like, it should have been a factor. Like the rain should have been a huge factor in this game. Yeah. But having a guy at quarterback who keeps the ball out of danger and handles it well, was even able to run and get some positive yardage at times, that's critical in any SEC game. But certainly in one that could have gotten messy, we've seen games where it rains consistently and it just becomes a turnover fest, right? That never really happened for South Carolina in this one. So I go back to Colin Hill, the command of this offense. Some of the throws he made were very impressive as well, but just putting the ball in the right spot again. I think we're going to be a broken record by the end of the year saying that, but it's still worth talking about.
Yeah, you look at the Tennessee game. They had the pick six where the ball looked a little bit, tipped, and that was a play where just a bunch of things went wrong. But other than that, I think the Florida game where he sort of dropped it in between two defenders is a little dangerous. The ball to Josh Vann that he didn't quite come down with. I think the defender got like a fingertip on it. But there haven't been a lot of throws where you've gone, man, that's a terrible decision. I know some people have made, and look, there were some throws even in this game. I recall just one off the top of my head. I think it might have been on that first drive where he throws the ball to Mullins, and it was in traffic a little bit. It was a ball that could have been caught, and he had Kevin Harris had just sort of leaked out, little angular sort of route, and had him open, and Harris might have gotten a first down, after he ran the football, and probably would have run somebody over or run around somebody. But, so people point those things out. But I do think with Colin, you got to understand that I think early in the game they were making a concerted effort, right, to be a little bit more aggressive. And he has done a really good job of taking what they give you, and with this offense, a lot of people have been clamoring for take more shots, do this. And they do. Look, they need to hit some of those plays or they're not going to be able to play up, to some of the better competition like a Georgia that they're going to have. They're going to have to hit some of those plays. But also you have to recognize with that, the receivers have not shown a lot of explosive potential, right? And so more downfield passes may just be more incompletions. We even saw that against Vanderbilt, right? There were some downfield throws they hit. There were some they didn't hit. So that's an area in which they need to continue to grow. But I think for Colin Hill and for Mike Bobo, they've done a good job of structuring the offense in a way that's going to give them a chance. And then they've done a pretty good job of executing that enough to where they've scored enough points in all these games to win. Just to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, by the way, real quick, back to the Chill nickname, Rodney Creel. I haven't seen that anywhere else. Rodney, here on GC Live, we're officially giving you credit. But hey, put your Twitter, if you're on Twitter, Rodney, put your Twitter handle on here. I'm gonna shout that out, and also shoot me an email, man. Wes at GamecockCentral.com. I might be able to hook you up with something. That's a good one. I think we can actually make that stick. So let's make that happen. Put that out there into the world. Good stuff. That is perfect. So, all right, let's shoot over to defense, and then we'll maybe work our way back around the offense. But if we're going to talk about the defense, Chris, it has to start with the words Ernest Jones. Dude, so just all over the field, making tackles sideline to sideline, works off of blocks, disengage. Muschamp talked about the defensive lineman not able to disengage, from blocks. And I think you look, Ernest is able to do that. You look at the key fourth down, which I think really sort of just changed the entire complexion of the game. If Vanderbilt scores a touchdown there, maybe they get a little momentum on offense. Maybe they feel a little better about themselves, and it sort of maybe it stays interesting for a little bit longer. But Vandy doesn't score there, and then basically, I would say South Carolina shoves it down their throat after that with a 96-yard run. That's such just a momentum killer. And Ernest Jones is obviously the one chasing down that play. Great coverage on the back end, too, so don't want to take away from anybody else on that play. But, man, Ernest, I think we've seen – for me, he's probably played the best consistently through 3 games of anyone on this defense. I don't know if he would grade out that way. I don't know what the coaches have him at. But just as far as consistently making plays for this defense and being there and being a leader and being the voice and, all the things you want from a middle linebacker. For me, 53 is that dude.
Yeah, I thought it was his best game of the year, maybe one of the best he's played. He's so important. I mean, you look at that game, Ernest Jones, has to come off because his helmet comes off. So by rule, you got to go off the field, and they call a timeout. And Muschamp was asked about that afterwards, if it was to get Ernest back on the field, because after the timeout, of course, you can go back on the field. And he admitted that was part of it. Part of it was their defensive look, but I tend to think that was a huge part of it. He's so important. And that was an important situation. Vanderbilt's down there potentially about to score. And so you want to make sure Ernest Jones, which is the guy, is their Mike linebacker. He's responsible for getting everybody set, making sure they're in the right call, being able to check into different calls. He's a guy that's taken leadership and ownership. And so to have him out there is really paramount. And so having him healthy obviously is important. He hasn't missed a bunch of snaps at all this year. He's been on the field a ton. And so you look at the fourth down play made where he's responsible for the quarterback on that boot, and he sort of shoots through some trash sort of immediately and goes and makes the play. And, there were some other plays where he created some tackles for loss situations. Just done a really good job being in position. And I think credit him because he was pushed by Muschamp and the coaching staff of, hey, you played pretty good the first 2 games, but we need more and you can be better. And he's the type of kid that's going to take that challenge to heart. And I think we saw that, in game 3. So it'll be big for this defense if he can continue, playing better.
Yeah, I thought, by the way, maybe a forgotten guy in that sequence on, the third down play. And Craig is going exactly where I was about to go. Craig Godwin on our YouTube live right now, talking about Shiloh Sanders. Shiloh was one of the effort players of the game on defense by the staff. And if you look at the third down play, South Carolina, right after they'd used the timeout, they ran a man coverage, and Shiloh was at safety but was lined up on the slot guy. And Vandy basically tried to pick off Shy. They did a little quick throw to the flat. It was kind of like either a little flat throw or a bubble screen. I can't remember exactly what the play was, but basically there was 3 receivers to that side, and the 2 receivers were running routes to basically try to pick off the guy in man coverage with the farthest slot receiver, the farthest to the inside slot. And Shiloh hustles out there, runs through the trash, and then makes the tackle short of the sticks, and then actually put South Carolina in position to then have the fourth down, and then Ernest Jones makes the play on fourth down. So Shiloh, I think had to play quite a bit more, partially because it seems that Izzy was banged up again, and obviously Jalen Dickerson was not there. And I think you look, and he's a kid who's continued to sort of come on. I think at times is still learning that position, but the hustle is there. And he's not the biggest dude, but he hits. He brings the lumber. So I think he's a guy I'm interested to see, Chris, how Shiloh continues to progress when you consider that he's not really, strangely enough, being Deion's kid, hadn't played a ton of football, prior. So he's another one. I wouldn't say, that he's still learning basically. So I'm not going to get ahead of myself on this, but I do think there were some positive signs from an energy standpoint, speed to close down on some plays, down the field that were bigger games, but he's cleaning it up at safety. And then that play as well really caught my eye.
That was, I mean, a lot of more snaps this week for the reasons that you laid out. I think he's shown activity. He's been active. He's around the football. He's not afraid to get physical at all, which has been really good to see. When he got to South Carolina, obviously, I think he was one that people latched onto because of his name, the bloodlines, and you maybe expect too much too soon in some cases. But he was a guy that was sort of raw, like you said, hadn't played as much football as one would think. Also a baseball player, so split some time between those sports. So he just playing safety early. It's a position in this scheme where you got to learn a lot, and so he's come a long way. They felt like coming into this season, South Carolina did, that he was going to be ready to step up his role, and he was needed because of Dickerson being out in this game. They needed somebody to step forward and play more. And, Shiloh, I think, answered the call. I mean, that play stood out. There were some other plays that stood out. One other one on that fourth down, I just wanted to make sure I mentioned this because we talked about Ernest Jones. So, John Dixon on that play was also huge. They had, they were sort of bunched up on the line, and they had one receiver out to the right off the line, and Dixon was the guy sort of on the island out there, and he ran an inside route, and Dixon lets him go and goes with the running back who was leaking out to the right and made sure that he had that covered, didn't go for the quarterback and leave the guy behind him. He came off his guy, trusted the help behind him, and made the right read there that made the quarterback, Ken Seals, try to extend the play out and ultimately get tackled. So a lot of things went right on that one. John Dixon, I think, is continuing to play well. So there were some good signs. Is this offense, Vanderbilt's offense, not good, guys, at all. But there were still some good signs from some of the young players. I think one thing that might be getting a little off topic, a little disconcerting that Muschamp mentioned, you hit on this earlier, Wes, the defensive line play. It was good at times, but still had some inconsistencies. We saw Vandy's running back. I mean, I would say, I went through the stats a little bit earlier. 4 out of his first 7 or 8 runs were 8 yards a clip. It's not something you can afford, So that was something that he wasn't too happy about, just in terms of they need to clean up some of the stuff with gap integrity and fighting through some of those blocks and disengaging a little bit better. That's something that I think, can take away from this game that they've got to continue to improve.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, if you were just to glance at these stats, and I at some point I want to get back to the third down efficiency on defense because that is a continued positive for South Carolina. But if you were just glance at these stats, you'd say, well, South Carolina had 484 yards of total offense, Vandy 249, Carolina 196 through the air, Vandy 173, and then South Carolina 289 yards on the ground, Vandy 76 yards rushing on 33 carries for 2.3 yards per rush. And you'd say, wow, South Carolina did a really good job defensively against the run. But then, because of the fact that in college football, the sack totals are subtracted basically to, from the overall rushing totals, which makes no sense at all. And you see that Vandy lost, 20 yards on carries by Ken Seals. So, their quarterback. And then they had a 6-yard loss that was on, I guess, a reverse by Tyrell Alexander, the running back. But point being, when Vandy's just lining up and running the football, the Henry Brooks kid, he has 13 carries for 72 yards, which is a 5.5 yards per carry average. Their other back has 6 for 27, which is at 4.5 yards per carry. So when they're actually running, when you sort of dial it down to the guys who are actually running the football, I think Muschamp is seeing that and saying, that's far too much success allowed. And he's probably, what would the word be? He's like extrapolating it to what would have happened. And he's never going to say this, but what would that have looked like if it was against an offense with the skill guys to really hurt you?
Yep.
Because Vandy, I was looking, Will Helms said South Carolina, according to PFF, had 2 missed tackles defensively in this entire game, which, again, let's have perspective. That means, yes, you did some really good things defensively. That also, Chris, probably means you were not facing athletes with the ability to make you look bad in open space.
Yep.
So if the same amount of room was available, as in that's the same amount of room was blocked for a much better running back, let's say, I don't know, Tank Bigsby this Saturday, who everybody that follows South Carolina recruiting is very familiar with.
Yep.
If Tank Bigsby has quite a bit of room to operate, he makes a guy miss, and then a 6-yard run is a 17-yard run, and it sort of builds on itself as the game goes along. So I think that's Muschamp sort of being honest and saying, look, there were positives, but we can't have that against better teams or better backs, I think.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I mean, a lot of it goes along with that same line of thinking when Muschamp has said, he said it repeatedly, especially after the Florida game, even carrying over to Vandy, you're going to have missed tackles as a team, and people get upset about that, but it is being realistic. You do not go into an SEC football game and play Florida and Tennessee, you go play Georgia, Auburn. You don't get through those and say, man, 0 missed tackles. That's awesome. It just literally doesn't happen. Doesn't mean, you accept it and just say, it doesn't matter. We're not going to worry about tackling because we'll just try our best. That's not the attitude. It's just saying when you play good skill position guys, the other team has offensive coordinators and really good players too. They're going to get their guys in space. And if they've got elite talent like a bunch of SEC teams do, they're going to get their guys in positions, and those guys are going to make some plays. So you're going to miss some tackles. So we saw it against Florida. A lot of one-on-one situations. Kyle Pitts, he won some one-on-ones, whether it was winning with a route, winning with a really good catch. We saw Kadarius Toney winning with a route, winning with a catch, and then a finish after the catch. So now what happened on that play obviously is not something you can have. You want to avoid more when you've got an opportunity to get a guy down, get him down, especially in a gang tackling situation. But yeah, we know, you look, Vanderbilt, they don't have, and that's something Chris Lee from Vandy Sports talked about, they don't have a lot of downfield threats. Their running game isn't dynamic. I think what we saw from them is something that you can be, concerned about. It's not something this game, you can't get too high or too low about it. You can't take the defensive performance and say everything's fixed. You can't take the offensive performance and say everything's fixed because of the level, of talent that you're going against. But it is pretty obvious that some of those things in the run game, they still need to get cleaned up, because an 8-yard run against Vanderbilt could be, I don't know, it could be 80, against another team.
Yeah, man, and I think absolutely. And I lost my train of thought for a second there. I want to go back before we forget. And yes, Tank. People were talking about Tank in the comments. Tank's a dude, man, and we'll talk more and more about him as the week goes on. But I was watching them against Arkansas. I was like, yep, there's a reason that guy was one of South Carolina's top overall targets. And Tank, a little bit, not that their styles are different, but Tank in one way is very much like Kevin Harris, in that I feel like Tank is going to bring the lumber throughout the game, right? Like Tank is a very well put together kid, and you got to be ready to tackle this dude all night long. And really, that's a guy. If South Carolina could have added him into what they have already at running back, you're talking about something really, really special. But that's neither here nor there. So, All right, Chris, South Carolina, third down defense efficiency forces Vandy to be 1 of 11, which has quickly become one of the greatest strengths of this defense is getting off the field. Vandy, Chris, was also 0 for 3 on fourth down. So essentially you're talking about being 1 for 14 on sort of get off the field situations. That is, I would say, probably the best we've seen South Carolina be in sort of this category. Now, will there be some type of, I would call it regression to the mean at some point? I need to pull up the numbers. I think South Carolina's given up like 6 first downs on third downs this year in 3 games, which is a crazy good number. It's probably going to sort of, I don't know if you can keep up that pace on third downs is what I'm saying. But still, to do it through 3 games against some pretty good talent the first 2 weeks, it's certainly something worth talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, that gives you some reason for encouragement. Now, it's not going to stay that, the rest of the year. But to play, it wasn't just an outlier against Vanderbilt, because even in the first 2 ball games, they were solid, in terms of third down conversions. It was what we saw against Florida and Tennessee was mistakes, and we saw explosive plays. And so those are the types of things that South Carolina is really going to have to avoid going forward. So if they can get a little bit better in those areas, and preventing explosive plays, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. It's a complex thing, from your front to tackling to ball in the air, or maybe a quarterback overthrows it, maybe drops it in. There's just so many different things at play, whether you're talking about explosive plays offensively and trying to prevent them on defense. It's very complex. And so if they can get better in that area, they're not going to stay at this. They're not going to hold people 1 for 11 on third down. It's just not going to happen. Georgia or Auburn, they could come out and have 3rd and 9 all day. They're probably not going, 1 for 11. So they are going to have to find that balance. They're going to have to do a better job of limiting those explosive plays, not having penalties to keep the team back on the field. Things like that is, again, this is a low margin of error team still. But if they can take that type of performance on third down, stay good in that area, and get a little bit better at the other areas, it's going to give them a chance to improve defensively. But this is a team that, they've improved offensively and defensively on third down. That was a huge area for this team to improve on. They've done better in both categories from what we know.
Yeah, you see the numbers right there for the season. 6 conversions allowed on 31 attempts, a 19.35% conversion rate for opponents. So that's pretty crazy. But like you said, there's no way you keep up at that clip. But even if if you look at the numbers here, if you can hold a team into the 30s, basically a 30% conversion rate, you're doing pretty dang good. And you look all the way at the bottom there, Ole Miss. I don't know if I've ever seen South Carolina give up just 19% of their first downs on third down. I don't know if I've ever seen a team through 3 games give up 64% of conversions on third down, which is what happened to Ole Miss.
Exactly. And our friend Louis Antonelli made a good point. He said UF wasn't held to a third down until well into the second quarter. So that does play a factor. You look at South Carolina's attempts, they're also, it looks like they faced almost the lowest number of attempts in the SEC, right? So that can be a good thing and a bad thing. Obviously, when you get to third down situations, you want to get off the field. So you look at what is the rate. So the rate is really good. If you have a low number, that can be bad sometimes, because that means maybe you're giving up explosives, or teams are moving the chains, things like that. But, so we've seen some of that for South Carolina, but what we do know is their rate's good. Man, who would have had LSU, Auburn, Alabama, and Florida being in like the bottom half of the SEC in that category, right? I mean, you look at some of South Carolina is near the top. Arkansas is top 5 or top 6. Kentucky, we knew they'd be pretty good defensively, but some strange numbers in terms of the defense. And I guess Alabama and Ole Miss both hurt their numbers after the game that they had on Saturday.
Yeah. By the way, Lou, I love you, man, but I'm not happy with you right now. I believe I saw Lou commenting "Go Dodgers" earlier, so
man,
I cannot roll with that, Lou. I think that was him. The comments come through super fast, but go Braves. We're gonna get game 1 tonight. Sorry. Let's see, Craig. Yes, Jaheim Bell has been back on the field and practice, and I don't know, man. We've had a couple people ask, how quickly could Jaheim Bell make an impact this year? And Chris, I would say that's kind of hard to answer at this point because there's so many guys at tight end. Now, the cream ultimately rises to the top, but you look at Eric Shaw and the way Muschamp talks about him, what we've heard about Eric Shaw, the fact that he got back and sort of was able to get into the mix a little bit quicker. It'll be interesting to see what that tight end rotation ends up being as the year goes on, because I do think we're probably going to see, and I forgot another question from earlier I want to get back to that plays into this. I think we're probably going to continue to see more and more 2 tight ends on the field at the same time. We saw a decent amount of that against Vandy. They had the play that started the 96-yard drive, the ball to Nick Muse that really got South Carolina out of the shadow of their own goal line, was a 2 tight end deal where they had both wide receivers to the right, both tight ends to the left. A very vertical type play where you had one tight end running a post, the other one running a corner, and Vandy's defenders just got all out of whack. One was definitely a post, the other was more of like a corner or a wheel route, like an out-breaking type route. And basically, if Colin Hill wanted to throw to Muse, as he did, he could have. If he wanted to throw to Kevion Mullins, he could have as well. Literally, Vandy couldn't decide who to choose and thus covered nobody on that point as far as the tight ends go. But point being, I think there are some things you can do when you have tight ends that can run. I think this was a big confidence-building game for Nick Muse after having some drops. He had a drop early in this game as well, but made some big catches, is really good after the catch. And I think if you can get Mullins going, Will Register brings you something in the blocking department. They do use Prentice sort of as that H-back at times, but then bring on an Eric Shaw, bring on a Jaheim Bell. I think we're going to continue to see those guys maybe on the field more and more as the year progresses, potentially.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you got to remember about Eric and Jaheim. Talent-wise, I mean, probably only Nick Muse is comparable I'm just talking about raw talent, right? But the issue for these guys is they missed, talking about Eric, and I think Jaheim's around the same timeline. I mean, they missed 8 weeks. I mean, you're missing the OTA style stuff. Then you're missing preseason camp. I mean, that's hard. That's hard for anybody. It's hard for a freshman, a true freshman to come in and do that with other guys that have been around longer, whether it's Muse, whether it's Kevion Mullins, who's still young in his tight end progression, but he's been on the field, Will Register, Keyshawn Toney. I mean, there are guys that have played more. Talent-wise, they've got a lot of it. And so, Jaheim is 6'3", 230 right now. Told he looks really good. Eric Shaw, is going to continue to get bigger, but he's one of the better guys on the roster just in terms of raw talent and athleticism, just huge upside. So that's going to be the thing is how can you work them in situationally? Can they continue to progress and make that move quickly? Perhaps so. But I was also intrigued, Wes, by some of those, like you mentioned, that some of the 2 tight end sets, the way they use Prentice. He had some really good blocks, the one that you pointed out on the Kevin Harris run, the sweep that I mentioned to Sean Fenwick earlier. He made a key block out on the edge there that helped spring him. So, Prentice only played. I mean, his typical snap count is going to be, I think, 15, 16 snaps, something like that. But he's out there making an impact when he's on the field.
Yeah, go watch either Justin, if you look on Justin King's Twitter or my Twitter at West Metro GC, I retweet, commented it or whatever. Go watch that view of the Kevin Harris long touchdown run because, man, the blocking on that play, absolutely perfect and just beautifully done. I sort of broke it down a little bit there, but the way – and then, dude, Prentice put his guy on skates, like just hammered him out of the play. And then there's really one guy to beat. And if you do your job on any given running play, that's what you want, right? Is you're running back with one guy. And you need to have the back who can handle that one guy, who can make that guy miss. And the Vandy, poor 22, took an awful route to the ball, took an awful angle, and then Kevin just ran right by him. Which, man, Kevin, I think what we're seeing, and let's see, I get the two shows because I did another show right before I came on, so I don't know. I forget what I say in which show. But I have a little bit of a theory, Chris, on Kevin Harris, and I think we talked about him a little bit, but we probably deserve giving Kevin even more airtime here because he's been outstanding. But for one, I think Kevin Harris has been a true workhorse back for South Carolina. And we've seen them already. I remember going into game one, this was going to be running backs by committee. And, you do the snap counts every week. We're seeing South Carolina adjust into, hey, let's get 20 to football.
Yeah.
And part of my theory, man, is that I think football more and more in practice, even if you're doing scrimmaging a lot of times, other than maybe your one or two big preseason scrimmages, you're thudding, right? Like you're not tackling guys to the ground because you're trying to keep kids healthy. I think that Kevin Harris's skill set, the things that he does very, very well, really play up in an actual football game. Like there were probably signs of it in practice, and I think they were happy with Kevin. They talked about his consistency, how hard he's worked, and he was there was a reason he was the starter. But this also was a running back battle that had Orr on the depth chart. It said Kevin Harris or Deshaun Fenwick. So, man, I think when Kevin gets into an actual SEC football game and those guys have to actually bring him to the turf and they have to do it over and over and over again, that the way Muschamp always says it is there's nothing soft to hit on this guy. I think all those things play up in a real football game, and maybe we're not even that apparent in a practice where you're not having to bring a guy to the ground.
Yeah, it's an interesting theory, and I think I agree. And look, when Marshawn Lloyd went down, the first person I pointed to, we knew that Kevin Harris would get more snaps, obviously, because of that, and he would be the guy that went out there snap one.
And he'd be solid maybe.
Against Tennessee, and we thought he'd be good, and then Fenwick would get more carries because of that. And I'll put myself there. I pointed at Zaquandre White and said, this is the guy that's going to have a big opportunity to rise. And he's played some, against Tennessee and against Vanderbilt, but Harris has just, from the start, he's just made it happen. You go down here, looks pretty good in the second half against Tennessee, and then against Florida, he's the first back since Marcus Lattimore since 2000 to rush for 100 down in the swamp. And then he has this game against Vanderbilt. And so, when he's done a good job vision-wise, has been better than I've anticipated. If he's in the open field, we hadn't commissioned a study on it, but has the first guy brought him down? Probably not very often, maybe here and there. But if he's upright, going full steam ahead forward, there's not many guys that are going to tackle him immediately right off the bat if he's got a little bit of a window. So he's been a little bit more elusive than I anticipated. And certainly we knew he's a big, powerful guy, but he's looked faster even. So he's been a revelation for South Carolina. He's been huge for this team.
And second in the SEC in rushing right now, behind the Bama kid. But man, I think all the things we just talked about, I thought Kevin would be solid at all those areas.
Yeah.
But I didn't think he would be phenomenal. And it's a little bit the way he runs. And I mean that literally, like his gait, like the way his running motion tricks your eyes a little bit, because he has a unique running style. He runs a little bit stiff almost, but it tricks your eye into thinking that he's not as fast as he actually is, because we saw the run. Obviously, everybody saw the long run against Vandy. But even some of these outside runs that they've used him in, and it doesn't always look like he's going that fast around the edge, but he always seems to be able to turn the corner, which tells you he's fast. He's as fast as he needs to be in any given scenario. So I think you go back, Chris, and I think I'm going to write a story on this, but the guy didn't have a bunch of offers, and he comes to South Carolina's camp. Do you remember what he ran in the 40 at camp? Because that was one of the big questions.
I think it was 4.55.
That sounds right to me as well.
4.5 range, but I think it was 4.55 or so.
They liked the film. They wanted to see him. And, that's something Chris and I, one of the best parts about our job, we're out there watching these guys at camp in the summer and getting a feel for them. And here's this Kevin Harris kid, had an offer from Army? It was Service Academy.
Yeah, Service Academy offers, yep.
Comes in, very, very just under the radar. South Carolina wants to see him run, put the 40-yard dash on him, see what he runs. They offer him. He commit that day, Chris.
Yeah, he did. Yep.
On him, takes his opportunity, commits, boom. And again, even as much as I like to think and feel like we have a feel for the pulse of this team and what's happening, he has by far exceeded my expectations for him this year. And dude, I'll even, to your point about the first guy, there was a play early in the game where, and they've been using all these little swing passes to the running backs, where Colin Hill swings the ball out to Kevin Harris, and the Vandy defender played it absolutely perfectly. And he comes out there, and the two of them just collide and just bounce off of each other. And the thing about Kevin, too, though, is his balance is so good. Even if he slams into somebody, it's like he recovers and then just starts going forward. And would have been stopped short on that play, but instead picked up a first down. You remain on the field, and you're able to sort of keep your offense moving, which obviously is the name of the game. I had a question earlier about receivers, Chris. Still a work in progress other than Shi Smith. What are your thoughts on what we're seeing from other guys? I would say, at least, again, you sort of see these little glimmers, little flashes from Xavier Legette. I think we saw that again on Saturday.
I'd go back to what Will Muschamp said on his post-game TV show, in that he was talking about the Xavier Legette catch, one where he over the middle, where he dove for it, ball was sort of underthrown, and he sort of scooped it up. Really, really difficult catch, and got his hands under it. And he said that was a confidence builder. And so that's something that's been talked a lot about with some of these guys, whether it's DeCarrion Joyner or Xavier Legette. They got to build some confidence. They got to get some balls that come their way, and they got to be able to make those plays. And that hasn't always happened. So hopefully for South Carolina and for him, that can happen. They got to get more of a vertical presence throughout this season. And so Xavier is the guy that you'd sort of pinpoint. Can he be that 50-50 ball guy? Can he go make some plays, not only in space, but vertically? And so maybe he's got the skill set to do that. So they just got to get more consistent. They got to bring some guys along. Josh Vann still hasn't been, I know he had at least one catch in the game. I remember he sort of slipped, could have gotten closer to the chains. Josh Vann's done a good job blocking. Seriously. There was the Colin Hill touchdown run, one of them, the longer touchdown run. Josh had his back to a guy because he was out in a route and then immediately recognized it and blocked his guy out of the picture. There was another play, I think, against Florida in which he did that. So that's a big part of it, playing receiver successfully. So I think, look, it's gonna continue to be a storyline. Can they have guys not named Shi Smith get open against Auburn and get open against Georgia? And it's going to be an ongoing question. But can Xavier Legette carry what he did and have some confidence? Even DeCarrion Joyner not catching that ball, but just going on a reverse and scoring a touchdown, will that spark some confidence? Can this group get better as they go along? Maybe. And that's something I think is going to be huge. But it's still a big question mark.
Yeah, and Ernest asked, will teams stack the box and play more man coverage? Absolutely. I think that's what you're going to see. Vandy, from what I saw, they just don't have the horses, y'all. They were playing – I saw them playing quite a bit of zone, I think, and Carolina was able to get some guys open underneath that. Again, I'm sort of barely through the first half in my, detailed rewatch, but in the first half, lots of zone, lots of stuff open underneath and down the seams, and that's just not the same as what some of these teams that recruit very well at defensive back and Auburn and LSU. I mean, it's going to be very different trying to get open against teams. But I absolutely think you're right, Ernest. You're going to see more man coverage and more, an extra guy in the box as the year goes on. Speaking of building confidence into DeCarrion Joyner, I think worth pointing out, man, the reaction from the sidelines when DeCarrion Joyner scores that long touchdown. And I think it was Spurrier that used to talk about the morale builder of having a big win and just being able to empty your bench, get some guys on the field. Zaquandre White gets to play. Vinny Murphy and all the backup offensive linemen get on the field. Trey Adkins actually played earlier in the game, a walk-on receiver. But Mo Kaba gets in on defense. Cam Smith gets to pick off a pass. After we all saw the game one, the way the season sort of started for him. That, I guarantee, after the way last year ended and the way this year started, there's probably not been a better day in that football facility than coming back to work after winning a game and everybody getting to play on Sunday. So that is something you absolutely can build off of. A key game, we're going to talk about it all week long, but a turning point opportunity for South Carolina coming up this week. But Chris, just watching the reaction of guys and being genuinely happy for their teammates. I talked about it on Twitter. Zaquandre White is the team hype man. Watch number 11. He's always hyping somebody up. He's always on the sideline. That guy should be a strength coach when he's done playing football because he has more energy than anybody I've ever seen. But, dude, it had to feel good for those guys coming back to practice, getting that winning feeling.
Yeah, definitely. Somebody put it to me like this after the game. He said just winning just cures so many evils. It makes everything so much easier, because then you're going – think about after a loss or like a losing streak, which is what South Carolina's been dealing with dating back to last year, and then they're dealing with a long streak of losing more than they win. You don't have that result to point to. So you're sitting here, you're not going through the motions, so to speak, because I don't want to insinuate that the guys aren't trying hard. They are. But when you don't have that result to point to, and this is something Muschamp's talked about a lot, it makes it more difficult to go throughout the week and prepare. And then if you get knocked down again, that makes it tougher. So, yeah, I mean, was it an inferior opponent? Sure. But, I mean, just getting back in the win column is something that helps a lot, and it can build confidence. This team needs some confidence. They've gone toe-to-toe the first 2 weeks, but they want to win. They needed a win, and so they were able to get one. They were able to get it in a fashion in which they're not sitting there going, why are we in a nail-biter with Vandy in the fourth quarter? There was none of that. And so Chandler, you said what you end up with is what you talked about, Vinny Murphy and Manos playing and Wyatt Campbell and Chandler Farrell playing defensive tackle and tight end in the same game. You even got a dose of that. So as a good thing. And so maybe it's something that, as you know, people aren't going to look around at that result and be impressed by it, nor should they be. But you get a win when you should have, and you do it in a way that perhaps built some confidence for some guys.
Yeah, Vandy, again, not a great football team at all, but South Carolina doing what they were supposed to do in the rain, on the road, self-starting sort of. There's no fans. There was some – I did notice on TV there was some annoying person yelling for Vandy, some annoying mic person.
Yes.
I'd have wanted to beat Vandy just to shut that person up. But, you know, I think to go down there and do what you were supposed to do, worth commending for this team. Chris, I think that's about it. We're at an hour. You got any final thoughts, or should we just roll it on into tomorrow, man?
Let's roll it on into tomorrow. Let's start talking about Auburn a little bit. Looking forward to sort of diving into that matchup.
Yep, so South Carolina players will talk Tuesday morning. We'll have complete coverage of that on Gamecock Central. Will Muschamp will talk at 12:30. We'll have coverage of that. And then Chris and I will be right back here on your screen or on your podcast platform, and we'll break down everything that the players and Will Muschamp had to say, and we'll start diving in to this huge key. Circle it. Chris, should I tell them about what I emailed y'all last week, or should I just keep that about my prediction, or should I just keep that in-house?
No. If it's any sort of prediction, you have to string it out as long as possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got you. All right. Later in the week, I'll show everybody what I emailed Chris and our boss, Shoemaker, last week. So, all right, y'all. Enjoyed it. Appreciate all the comments. If we missed a question along the way, I apologize. We'll get to you next time, and we'll see y'all tomorrow.